So today I've got a 65-year-old client who's already retired, and her concern is that she's got a son whose income is covering about half of her household expenses. Now she has about $300,000 or so saved, but what she's worried about is if her son has a premature death, that about half her income goes away. Can she support her retirement for the next 25 or 30 years in her son's absence? So we're going to find out today. Let's go ahead and jump into a planning session. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as that helps me continue my efforts to produce these videos. All right, so I'm on the dashboard of the planning software, and we can see here she's got about $280,000 worth of retirement savings. I'm going to jump into reports. We're going to take a look at a cash flow statement to see how things will look over the next 25 or 30 years, assuming her son stays alive. And so if we look just down here, let's take or zoom into her income flows. I'm going to open income flows, and we can see what that's comprised of. So she has in-house support from her son, for her son, and that's about $9,000 per year and growing each year with inflation by 2.5%. Son's disability, it looks like he pays, actually I know what happens here, he pays a portion of the household expenses, the rent namely. So she's collecting an income from him for that as well. And then she has her Social Security benefits. And, between those four sources, we've got about $33,000 per year to the client. So let's go back now and look at her expenses, and then we can start getting a feel for how things will look without her son's income. So looking down, I'm going to take a look at year 66, even though she's retired. Sometimes the software is funky and it only gives us partial year up here. And we see her expenses are about $52,500 a year. Okay, so what's the difference between that? Obviously, we subtract your income from your expenses. And the difference, if it's a negative, that's called a shortfall. And here we see she does have a shortfall. It's about $20,000, call it $19,000 per year. So she's got $19,000 shortfall for several years, all the way up until I would assume that's RMDs, not RMDs. Any guess on what that might be? I would bet that it is a liability paid off. And I took the client's input, so this one I know. She's paying off some, she had home renovations, and then I believe a second on the home. So some of that's getting paid off. And so we see her shortfall falls because her expenses are lower. And we can take a look at that in just a minute. But coming back up here to the top, that shortfall is being covered by her investment accounts, her retirement savings. And let's go ahead and take a look at what the withdrawal worksheet, and we can see how much she needs from her retirement accounts. How much do her assets need to earn on an annual basis in order to cover that shortfall? And those first several years before she pays that debt off, it's really high. This is almost unattainable. So this is about 9% in the first year, and then we got 7 or so. We're shooting for 5% typically for retirement clients because they're conservative. You guys don't have, you're now dependent on these assets in order to sustain living throughout retirement. So you can't throw the dice as hard as you could when you were younger, when your earnings from your employer, your wages, were covering the cost of your living expenses. So we normally do about 5%, at least we project for 5%, and this is too high here. But we get some of that debt paid down, and the shortfall drops dramatically. And so, she's down to 3.2%, and we get into a point where things are a lot more sustainable. We kind of start to get closer to 4% here, but she's doing 5% on average. So she would be fine in this case. Now let's take a look at that debt. I just want to make sure that, in fact, that's what's taking place here, because we're dropping, about $12,000 or so worth of expenses off. So if we go back and we jump into total expenses, we should be able to see liability payments. Yeah, and here we go. So we're going from 27 to 16. And then 16.9 to 14. That's just the home payment she's left with there. So yeah, right here we're we're knocking off about 11 or 12,000 right there. So it is. It's in fact those liability payments. And if we look at that, she's got the Kia that gets paid off. The mortgage is sustained, but this Wells Fargo for $5K a year gets paid off, and this $2,000 per year on the home renovations is also paid off a few years later. So she's fortunate in the sense that those liabilities are paid off at some point, and for that reason, her expenses come down, her shortfall comes down, the amount that she needs from her retirement accounts come down, that percentage, from 7 or 8% all the way down to something that's achievable, about 3.5 to 4. So we can see the saving grace for this client is that she pays that debt off, and that reduces her expenses. And with lower expenses, she needs less from her retirement savings. So now we're going to go back to the plan, and we're going to remove the IHSS income and also the disability that her son is paying. He's paying her a portion of his disability for rents. When we do that, it's obvious that her shortfall will go up. How will her assets handle that change? Let's go ahead and find out. So we're back here in the plan, and I've jumped over to the plans tab here. And what I'm going to do is make a duplicate of our base facts, and we will call this advanced plan, and we can call it omitting son's income. So you guys know what that is. Now I'm going to jump into the area where we can make updates to the original plan. Other income, IHSS for her son, and see, we're going to change that to 0. And then we're going to head back and we're going to update the other source of income, son's disability, which is being used to help with rents, 0. All right, so let's jump now back to our reports. Let's open that scenario and see how things look. So advanced plans, omitting son's income, and what do we got? Well, that is not a first good sign. All right, what happens? So like I said earlier, her income drops dramatically. Let's open this up and take a look. Yeah, her income, both of his sources are gone. So her income drops to less than half, and that increases her shortfall to $40,000. In that first year, I says let's focus on the second year. It's about $36,000, so it's way up. And that's coming off of her retirement assets. And again, those are only earning 5% per year. She ends up depleting her cash to 0 over, it's about from 22 to 2034. So she's got about 12 years after his death in order to, before she runs out of money in retirement. Let's look at the withdrawal worksheet. And we see it right here. It's just 14.5%, 14%, and it just runs up. So what's happening in this withdrawals worksheet is that we take that shortfall, 36,000, and we divide it by her remaining assets, her retirement savings, and that gives us a percentage. And we are comparing that to what we earn in the market, because if we can hit 14% per year, then she would have capital preservation. Her assets would remain, the balance of her assets would mostly remain unchanged. Now, capital appreciation is if you can do a little bit better than this 14%. If she was doing 15%, the assets would be growing by about 1%. In this case, she's doing the opposite, right? She has capital depletion because she's earning 5% on these assets, but she's spending 14%. So she is spending 8% more than what she can earn, which is not a good place. 9% more than what she can earn, not a good place to be. And you can see that ultimately what she's taking, because the shortfall gets lower down here when she pays off those liabilities. If it wasn't for that, she'd run out, within the next 2 or 3 years, probably less than 10 years, 8 or so years. But those do fall off, so her shortfall comes down. So she needs at one point a little less. But even at $25K a year with what's left in the account, it's just not enough. It's just that the amount she needs to earn gets so high, it's impossible, and it gets higher every year until ultimately she runs out of money. Well, I kind of saw that one coming. You probably did too. Without her son's income, she just doesn't have enough in her retirement savings to support that shortfall. The shortfall is just too big. And even when she pays those liabilities off in 6 or 7 years at $25,000 a year, it's still too much coming from what she has left in those retirement accounts. So in other words, this client, without her son's income, cannot thrive through retirement. She has to come up with a plan. So the question is, what could she do? Well, the first idea that comes to my mind is buying a life insurance policy on her son, a policy that would make up for the income that she loses when he dies. So I'm going to show you guys how I would compute that. So let's jump back to the plan. So here I am. I'm going to run a quote for her son. So I'm just going to put Miss Client's son. 1/1/1980, 42 male, and this is in California. Term, we normally go with term. Now we want that for the maximum time, 30 years typically on the term policy, and that'll be enough, right? That 30 years is enough to get her from age 65, to 95. And we can look to see if a 35-year policy is available, but by the time she gets to 95, she will have so many retirement years behind her that she should be all right. So we're going to say, what, 360,000. And we'll go with the second notch down here, preferred non-tobacco, just to be conservative and get quotes. So let's see what 360 cost us. So not bad. I'm going to look at protective here just because I like protective, and it's pretty close, 15-cent different per year, $694.30 per year. So now I'm going to jump back to the software. So now that we have the life insurance quote, what I'm going to do is come back into the plan, and we're in that one that we made, the duplicate, where we went ahead and removed the two income items that would leave at her son's death. But what I'm going to add to this now is the $360,000 death benefit she would receive the day he died. That would be year one of this plan. So the way I'm going to do that is just make change, and then I'll do qualified retirement assets, and I'm going to add that right to her Charles Schwab account. So if we jump in here, she's got 173, but what we want to do is go ahead and add the 360 to that. So we have 173, call it 174, plus 360,000. That's 534,000, 534, and we go ahead and hit save. Now all we have to do is jump back to reports and take a look at that plan. And I'll show you guys the difference here. So update, and well, things are looking pretty good. So she's got that call it 18,800 or 19,000 a year for the first few years there as it's growing with inflation. Then if we move to the right, we have our total expenses, still the same, so about 55 or so thousand per year. Shortfall, we know it was really high, jumped up because we lost his income, 36,600, 34, or excuse me, almost 40,000 a year. But it does not matter in the face of her retirement assets, because at $626,000, if we go up to that withdrawal worksheet, that is only, well, it's pretty close. In those first, let's make sure we're on the right plan here. And in fact, we are. It's pretty high in those first couple of years. It's about 5, almost 6%. But then, again, the saving grace here is those liabilities being paid down or off. She ends up below the 5% those assets are making, 4.5, 4.3. And we see that even as she starts to bump back up a little bit later on in retirement, she's got enough in order to make it all the way through. So a $360,000 policy, and I would say that's the least amount. She may be even, we can go up a little higher. Let's just go back to the plan. Let's see how it looks if we just round up to 400. So add another 40,000 in there, because she's still a little close. We want it to be under 4 all the way through if we can. But we don't want to spend too much in the policy neither, because so if we add calculator, another 40,000, so we're at 574. We'll just change that to a 7, and we'll hit save. Come back to reports, and let's jump in here and take a look. There it is. And if we look at the withdrawals, now that we have a little more, we're looking at Okay, yeah, we're a little closer, not by a whole lot. I mean, technically for 600 and it was like $700 per year, I would argue the client should shoot for $500,000 to $1 million worth of insurance. It's so cheap for 30 years. I mean, we're talking, not even $100 a month. We're talking $75 a month or something, $50 to $75 a month. And this client has a very secure retirement plan at that point. So yeah, there you go. All right, so there you've got it. Life insurance to the rescue. Client has a son who's dependent upon two sources of income in order to keep afloat through retirement, and in the absence of that income, we see imminent failure. However, she's rescued by a life insurance policy equal to $360,000 for a 30-year period. Now, that pushes her all the way to age 95, and if she dies after that, even if she made it to 95, it's okay because she only has several years of retirement left. And by that point, she should have enough in order to get through those final years. And so going back to how much she should buy, I would say 360 is the minimum because we see our withdrawal rate there is pretty close. I would probably, if it were me, push for 500,000. I mean, we're only talking about 75 to $100 a month or so. It's less than 100 because that would be 1,200 a year, and we were looking at $600 or $700 a year or something at 360. So you go up to $500,000. Maybe you're spending 10 or 15 more dollars a month or something, but you've got what you need in order to make it all the way through. So hopefully that gives you guys some insight on a solution that could be used to offset loss of income, whether it's a spouse or an heir whose income you're dependent upon. Life insurance is a great way to solve that problem. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and hopefully you have a wonderful rest of your day.